I'm going to turn this here so that everybody can see me. Hi, everyone. How's it going? Sorry for the little bit of a delay. I'm going to switch my camera around here and just move over. So hi, my name is Lori. I'm with California State Parks, and I'm at the Tule Elk State Natural Reserve. We're in Southern California, in the southern San Joaquin Valley. And today I'm going to read a book called Squeak. It mentions elk in the story. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about Tule elk and give you a little bit of history. Pardon me. And the program is probably going to last about 30 minutes, maybe a little bit less. We'll start with reading the story. If you need to get up and leave the room for a few minutes or get the wiggles out and stretch, that's fine, no problem at all. So let's get started with the book. And today I'm going to read Squeak by Laura McGee Kavsnovsky and Kate Harvey McGee. Early one morning, a breeze rippled through the meadows and mountains and tickled the ear of a small mouse. His eyes popped open. Squeak! That tiny squeak floated upward to the chipmunk's hollow. Out skittered the chipmunks, chittering and chattering. Branches shook and pine cones fell, kerplop, into the river. Do you see the river here? And the little chipmunks? Trout were resting right there in the river, dreaming their watery dreams. They leapt awake with a splish and a splash and a splish. See the fish jumping out of the river here? All that splishing and splashing woke an elk on the riverbank. He lurched up and bumped smack into a cottonwood tree. Kerbonk! Here's the elk. Then whoosh! An eagle launched from the top of the cottonwood tree, beating her wings against the pale morning sky. Wah whoosh, wah whoosh. See the eagle flying here? The rush of eagle wings woke two bear cubs. Out they tumbled from their cave, their mama hot on their heels. She tried to quiet them down. Grrr, she grumped. Grrr. Here's the mama bear, and here's the two little cubs. You can see the eagle flying away. But already a pup over in the wolf den had heard the bear shenanigans and started to howl. Yip, 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 yip. The pack woke up and joined. Ow! 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 Do you see the wolf pack here? And here's the little wolf pup. Their howls echoed across the cliffs and woke a bighorn lamb. When she leapt to another perch, rocks and gravel thundered to the meadow below. Ba-ba, rumble, 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 bumble, boom. See, here's the bighorn sheep and here's the little lamb. The biggest bison, snoozing down in the meadow, startled out of his dreams. He did not like to wake up before the sun. Arr! He bellowed, and louder, ow, ow. Here's the bison. The bison's bellows billowed over the mountains and meadows and woke up everybody else. Badgers popped out of their sets. Otters and beavers splashed into the river. Raccoons rustled. Snakes hissed. Frogs croaked. Bees buzzed. Foxes and jackrabbits swished through the slickery grass while swans and loons and warblers and ravens called and twittered and cooed. Do you see all the animals? Here's a raccoon. Here's some beaver swimming in the river. Here's one making a den. The small mouse heard the big ruckus and wondered, "Why is everybody up so early today?" Squeak, he whispered to himself. Then he snuggled in and drifted back to sleep. Here he is going back to sleep. So did you hear that I mentioned that there was an elk in the story? Well, I'd like to tell you a little bit about Tule elk. There are 3 kinds of elk in North America. There is the Rocky Mountain elk, the Roosevelt elk, those are the largest, and the Tule elk, which are the smallest, and they're native to California. Now, Tule elk, when they're born, they weigh about 18 to 30 pounds, but when they're full grown, they can weigh as much as almost 700 pounds, and they're 8 feet long from their nose down to their tail. So that's really long. Elks are what are known as herbivores. So what is an herbivore? That's an animal that eats only plants. They graze on grass or on small bushes or on another plant called a sedge, which is kind of a tufting plant that grows in the marshes in California. Now, there are not as many marshes as there used to be. And so, you know, kind of as a result of their habitat or where they live and where they get their food, there aren't as many elk. The other thing that really diminished the elk population was when tons of people came to California after gold was discovered about 150 or so, 170 years ago. And so we have this reserve behind us because there was a gentleman who happened to find a few elk left on his ranch, and he decided to protect them, and his name was Henry Miller. But elk are really interesting animals. Did you know that they're mammals? And so the way that we classify animals, we describe them in certain ways. And so these are some of the characteristics that are that define what a mammal is. And it is, they have fur or hair. So humans are mammals too, and see, we have hair. They're warm-blooded, so unlike a lizard or a snake, we don't have to go lay on a rock in the sun to warm up our body temperature. We maintain a temperature of about 98.6. And when it gets really hot and we have to cool ourselves off, we sweat, don't we? And that's what keeps our body cool. Well, it's similar with other mammals. They also are born alive, so which means they're not hatched out of an egg like birds are. They're born from their mother, and they grow inside their mother and then are born. They drink their mom's milk after they're born, so that's another kind of hallmark of a mammal. And the other thing is that mammals have really large and complex brains. So we have different lobes in our brains within our head. Well, elk are the same way, and many other mammals. Whales are mammals, dolphins are mammals, rabbits, things like that. So the other thing that we look at are things that are different to distinguish and classify animals. So what are different about elk than other mammals? Well, there's a group of mammals called ungulates, and that's kind of a funny word, isn't it? Can you say ungulate? And that means that they have hooves. So what animals do you know that might have hooves? Let me see. What about a horse or a cow? They have hooves, don't they? Well, sure they do. And one of the things that an elk has, it's also called an artiodactyl. And that's a really long word, isn't it? Artiodactyl. That means that it has an even number of hooves. And so if you can see this here, see how an elk, it has 2 hooves, or these are actually sort of fingers. So while we have 5 fingers, an elk walks basically on two functioning fingers, and then they have hooves where we have fingernails, don't we? So we don't have hooves, we have fingernails where they have these shiny, hard hooves. Another thing that elk do is they grow antlers every year. And so when they're very young and they first start to grow an antler, it will just be a single piece like this. And it will grow out of their head, kind of like this. And they shed them every year in the winter. So they start growing them around February or March, maybe even into April. And when they first have their horns sprouting or growing, they're covered in a soft, fuzzy skin that's called velvet. And let me show you what velvet looks like. So here we have an antler, and I don't know if you can see it too well, but do you see how fuzzy some of this is? And let me turn this around to where you can see a little bit more of the fuzzy part. This is called velvet. And then in July or August, they start to shed that velvet. So you can see how some of that has started to come off. And so it exposes the harder antler beneath. And as they're growing, antlers are made out of cartilage, and this provides blood and nutrients to the cartilage as it grows, the velvet, the skin. You can kind of see the inside here. And when an elk is full grown, their antlers are huge. They can be as much as 5 feet long. Do you see how huge this antler is? Can you imagine trying to walk around with an antler like this on your head? You'd have to have really strong neck muscles, wouldn't you, to support this kind of weight? And they have two, one on each side of their head. They may not lose them at the same time, so they may be walking around once they start losing their antlers with just one antler at a time. And the nice thing about when they lose their antlers is that that provides some material for other animals like squirrels or mice. And they can then gnaw on the antler, and it will help to sort of keep their teeth a little bit shorter. It also provides minerals and things like that. So elk, the Native Americans used to call them wapiti. Can you say that? Wapiti. And basically that means white rump. And so most elk have kind of a dark brown or a reddish colored coat, and they will have a white patch on their rump. And so that's kind of where they get that name from. However, when they're born, they have a spotted coat, and that helps them to blend in so that predators like coyotes or things like that won't find them. So let me show you this. This is, see the little white spots here and how the coat is kind of reddish or brownish? This is from a baby elk. So you can see, you know, kind of how they would be able to hide in tall grasses and things like that. And so what are some of the signs that we can look for if we don't actually see the elk themselves? Well, we can look for their tracks, right? And what are some other things that we might find laying on the ground? Well, when they go to the bathroom, they poop, don't they? Just like everyone else. Well, that we call scat. That's kind of the scientific name for it. And sometimes you will find that scattered around on the ground. Some of the other things that you may see are a tree that has been scratched up. So when the velvet is coming off of their antlers, they like to rub their antlers against a tree, and that will really scratch it up. Or in bushes, you may find some of that velvet draped on some of those bushes and trees and things like that. Those are called rubs, the trees that they like to rub their antlers on. They also create what are called wallows, which they love to swim and they love to wallow in the mud to cool off. And so when they wallow in the mud, it might create a little depression that's the size of their body. Or it could be, if there's a bunch of them together, kind of a bigger area that's a big wallow. The other thing is sometimes it will smell where there's a wallow, because sometimes you know, if they're going to the bathroom and there's water and mud and things like that, it can really smell. The other thing that we might find is when they shed their antlers, we might find their antlers on the ground. And so those are things that we can look for, even if we don't see the elk themselves, in order to determine if there are elk in the area. Now, an elk is about 4.5 feet to its shoulder. So pretty similar to the height of my shoulders. So they're pretty big. And then that doesn't include their head or their antlers beyond that. So elk were almost hunted to extinction after the gold rush. So after gold was discovered in California. And like I said, Henry Miller, who was a rancher, found some in this area on his ranch and was able to preserve and protect them. And so what started off as just a few elk grew to about 400 elk. And elk are native to California. So the elk that you see in other areas of California, for example, there's a nature reserve close to here, about 30 miles away, called Windwolves. And they have a herd of about 300 elk. Well, those elk are descendants of the ones that were saved right here on this property. So this Tule Elk Reserve is on the old Miller and Lux Ranch is what it's called. And that was owned by Henry Miller. So I noticed that there is an elk just right over here. So I'm gonna switch my camera around so that you guys can see what these look like. So we're moving. And can you see that elk in the distance? I'm going to zoom in a little bit. See him there? That is a bull elk. So male elk are called bulls. The females are called does, and the babies are called calves. But there he is, eating his breakfast. So I wanted to thank you for joining us today. And I just wanted to let you know also that there's a survey at the end of this program. So if you want to get your Junior Ranger badge, feel free to fill out that survey. But before you go, let's do one last thing. Let's recite the Junior Ranger Cub Pledge. Are you ready? Repeat after me. I promise to treat the earth and all living things with care and respect. Treat the earth and all living things with care and respect. Be thoughtful about what I do and how it affects others. Again, be thoughtful about what I do and how it affects others. Learn about the importance of nature and our heritage. Again, learn about the importance of nature and our heritage. I want to thank you for joining us, and I hope that you have a great day, and maybe you'll tune in at 10:30 for the Junior Ranger program. Talk to you later. From the Tule Elk Reserve, this is Lori. Bye-bye.